As usual, Walter lounged in his recliner, a beer in hand, eyes glued to the baseball game on the big screen. Nancy had headed upstairs after dinner. He had no clue what she was up to, and frankly, he didn't care. It felt like just another routine evening at home. Then, shortly before 7, the doorbell rang. Before Walter could even get up, Nancy's voice called from upstairs, "Walter, could you get the door, please?" "Sure thing," he replied. "I was planning on it anyway." He made his way to the door and opened it to find a sharply dressed man he didn't recognize. "Yes? How can I help you?" "I hope you're not selling anything," Walter said. "No, I'm here to pick up Nancy," the man responded. "For what?" Walter asked, his curiosity piqued. "We have a date," the man replied. Walter's eyes widened in shock. "You and my wife, Nancy, are going on a date?" "Yes," the man affirmed. Walter stood there momentarily, stunned, trying to process what was happening. "I'll call her," he said, heading to the base of the stairs. "Nancy, your, date is here," he expected her to question, "What date?" or "This isn't a real date." Instead, she simply replied, "Tell him I'll be down soon." Confused, Walter just stood there, trying to grasp the situation. When Nancy finally appeared, she was dressed in a revealing evening dress with heavy makeup. "Nancy, what on earth is going on?" Walter asked, incredulous. "I'm going on a date," she said matter-of-factly. "Married women don't just go on dates with anyone other than their husbands," Walter protested. "Well, I'm going," Nancy retorted. "I'm sick of spending my evenings watching you guzzle beer and watch boring sports. All I get from you is a burp or a fart, and you don't even bother to apologize anymore. When was the last time we did something exciting? If you can't give me any attention or a bit of fun, I'll find someone who can." She jabbed her finger into his chest for emphasis. "Don't wait up. If I'm lucky, I might not be back until morning." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Nancy took her seat in the waiting car and instructed the driver to move. Once they were out of sight, they both burst into laughter. "I wish I had a photo of his face," Nancy said, chuckling. "It was priceless. If this doesn't make him snap out of his rut, I don't know what will." "Don't you think this might make him angrier and make things worse?" the man asked. "I doubt it," Nancy said confidently. "He'll probably just sit there, confused. I'll be back before he gets too upset. I don't think he'd consider divorce that quickly, but I'm willing to take the chance. I might have overdone it by saying I might not be home until tomorrow, though. Well, it's too late now," her companion said. "Given the state of our marriage, I'd rather get a divorce than continue like this. Damn him. I love him to death, but I just wish he cared more about me and us." "Let's drive around the block and come back to see how he's doing," Nancy suggested. After a drive around the neighborhood, Nancy and her date returned and parked in the driveway. Walter didn't rush out as she had hoped. She went inside and didn't see him in the living room, though the TV was still on. She quickly searched the ground floor and then went upstairs. "He's gone," she said aloud. She called him on his mobile phone, hearing the ring. Rushing upstairs, she found his cell phone on the nightstand, his wedding ring lying nearby. She glanced around the room, noticing several of his personal belongings were missing. "Oh no," Nancy exclaimed, rushing downstairs to inform her date and check if Walter's car was in the garage. The man asked, "Where do you think he went?" "He probably headed to the bar to drink away his worries," Nancy guessed. "Worst case, he might even end up at a motel. I bet he's sulking like a petulant child. He'll regret it when he realizes I was just playing a trick on him. On the bright side, his departure might be for the best. If he feels bad about being so uninvolved, I don't mind letting him stew a little longer." Walter didn't return or call that night or the following morning. The next day, when Nancy could no longer bear the suspense, she called Walter's personal secretary long before lunch. "Patricia, please connect me with my husband," Nancy requested. "That won't work out," Patricia replied. Walter came in this morning, staggered around, and told me to be quiet while he sorted out personal matters. He asked about the company's health insurance, and I directed him to the HR person who handles it. He left without a word of thanks or explanation. This doesn't sound like Walter at all. Do you have any idea what might have happened to him? Did a close relative pass away or something? Nancy asked, concerned. I'm afraid I'm the reason, Patricia admitted. I pulled a stunt that backfired. Once I talk to him and smooth things over, I hope he returns to his normal self. Can you transfer me to that HR person? Certainly. Human Resources, Deborah speaking. Hi Deborah, I'd like to speak with Linda, please. She's currently in orientation with a new employee. Is there anyone else who can assist you? Can someone tell me what Walter Bennett was up to in HR today? I can check his file, but I need his permission to disclose any information. I'm his wife. Can you share anything at all? I can review his coverage under his policy if that helps. It was pure coincidence, but we would have reached out to you today regardless. Expect to receive a formal notice in the mail informing you that your coverage under your husband's health insurance has been terminated. You can retain your coverage for 180 days, provided you settle the outstanding debt. That's the only change he made. Overwhelmed, Nancy could only mutter a shaky "thank you" before hanging up. Why had Walter removed me from his health insurance? It then hit her. She rushed to her computer to check their online bank accounts, only to find that half the money had been withdrawn from both her checking and savings accounts. Oh no, he must be in the process of divorcing me. Nancy was at a loss about what to do next until her phone rang. It was Frank, their life insurance agent and family friend. This is Nancy, she answered. Hello, Frank. Nancy, what on earth is happening? Walter came by, canceled the automatic payout on your life insurance, and changed the beneficiary to the girls. You're no longer entitled to any money. Additionally, he transferred the automatic withdrawals for the life insurance payments to a new account. He seemed adamant that this was his decision. I'll need to send you an official notice about the beneficiary change and the termination of your life insurance. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I'm guessing things aren't going well between you two. I'm really sorry for all this. Please come see me soon so we can ensure your life insurance doesn't lapse. Am I right in thinking you two are getting divorced? Frank asked. Yes, thank you. I can't say more right now, Nancy replied, feeling the weight of the situation. She hung up and barely had time to process everything before her lawyer, Tom, who was also a neighbor and friend, called. Nancy answered with a tired hello. Nancy, it's Tom. Can you shed some light on what's happening? Walter came here and altered his will so that everything goes to the children and nothing to you. He also removed you from the list of potential medical decision-makers. When I asked him why, he said he didn't care if I informed you or not. He then requested a referral to a family lawyer. It seems like you two have hit some rough patches and are considering a divorce. If you two reconcile, I can always change things back. Susan and I have a lot of respect for you both. I have to go now, but I wish you the best. Okay, Nancy murmured weakly. The next call was from their twin daughters, who were away at college. Mom, what's going on? Dad called us, claiming you were seeing and sleeping with other men. He said he needed some space to date others before the divorce and assured us he had taken care of our future college expenses. We tried to ask him more, but he just told us he loved us and hung up. We're worried he might hurt himself. Can you explain why he's so upset? I'm the one who caused his distress, Nancy said, her voice trembling. I'm trying to find him to apologize, but I can't seem to locate him. Maybe we should try again. I just received another call. It might be him, her daughter said before hanging up. Hello, Walter? Nancy answered, hopeful. No, it's your mother-in-law, Doris. What's going on? My son called me in tears, saying something about you being with multiple men at a nightclub. He sounded drunk, so I'm not sure how true his claims are, but he was clearly upset. He mentioned he was going to resolve things by giving you your freedom and thanked us for raising him well. He even apologized for letting us down. I didn't like the tone of his call. He hung up before we could ask more questions and didn't answer when we tried calling him back. I'm worried he might do something rash. What happened between you two? I tried to help Walter overcome his midlife crisis by pretending to go on a date with another man. I wasn't gone for even 10 minutes, but when I came back, he was already gone. Now it looks like he's taken steps towards divorce, and I can't reach him to talk things through. I'm sorry, but it seems like your son is planning something drastic. If he harms himself, I'll hold you personally responsible. The call ended abruptly. Nancy's mind raced as she struggled to think clearly. She called every local hotel and motel, but Walter was not listed as a guest anywhere. Desperate, she contacted the police to file a missing persons report, fearing that Walter might be contemplating suicide. Unfortunately, she was told she had to wait another day before she could file an official report. Exhausted, Nancy took sleeping pills to try and get some rest, though the thought of suicide if Walter died haunted her. Fortunately, she knew the combination to the safe where Walter kept his automatic pistol and ammunition. She woke up groggy and turned on the TV, only to see a local news channel broadcasting a live report from the scene of an accident. This is Lamar Jackson with TV3 News. We're reporting live from Bender's Curve, where it appears another vehicle has gone over the edge. Sergeant Taylor from the State Police is here with us. Sergeant, can you provide details on what happened? It seems the car went off the cliff, breaching the strongest part of the barriers. The driver either had bad luck or knew what they were doing. From the absence of brake marks, it looks like the driver might have lost consciousness, been under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or possibly committed suicide. How did you find out about the accident? A driver heading the opposite direction called it in. He's here now. The camera cut to a young man. Could you please tell us your name? The reporter asked. I'm Kevin Reynolds. Am I on TV? I just wanted to say a quick hello to my mom. Hello, Mom, he grinned widely, his smile stretching from ear to ear. Kevin, could you tell us what you saw? Well, I was on my way home when I noticed this big truck barreling toward me. It swerved a bit and suddenly veered into my lane. I slammed on the brakes, and just then, it jerked sharply to the right, smashed into the guardrail, and went over the cliff. Can you describe the truck? Sure, it was a red Ford F-150, probably a 19 model. It had a Western Kentucky Mountain Man sticker on the back window. Did you get a look at the driver? No, the headlights were on, and I only caught a quick glimpse. He seemed like a man, but I didn't notice any passengers. That's all I know, thank you. Sergeant Taylor, did you call for help to locate the truck that crashed into the fence? Well, we're not entirely certain it was the truck that broke through the fence, but based on Mr. Reynolds' report, that's our assumption. From this vantage point, we can't see exactly what it is. We've got a search and recovery team in the mountains, but they're tied up with rescue operations in another part of the state. I'm not sure when they'll be able to get down there and check it out, but what if someone's still alive down there and needs medical help? Then you'd be witnessing a real miracle. No ordinary person could survive a fall like that onto those rocks. I wouldn't risk the lives of those unqualified to attempt an expedition just to find out. We have to wait for the mountain rescue team. Betts didn't have to wait long to figure out what happened or who might be dead. The moment she heard red Ford F-150 with a WKU Heltopper sticker, she broke down in tears. She ignored the phone ringing off the hook. By the time the twins came home, she was already 3 hours into sobbing, alone. When she didn't answer their calls, they panicked and rushed back home to be with her. Their grandmother had called to tell them about the news on TV concerning the red F-150. Despite the lack of a body, they were almost certain their father was the one who had crashed. The older twin picked up her mother's phone and handed it to her. The caller ID showed it was from a law firm. "Hello, this is Nancy Bennett." She could barely get the words out, her voice choked with tears. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Chris Andrews. I'm an attorney at the same firm where your friend Tom works. Your husband hired me to represent him in his divorce proceedings. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but Tom convinced me to. I was contacted by the Riverton police from Caldwell County. They were called to the scene of an accident. The man involved suffered a head injury. His wallet and keys were stolen. He was taken to the emergency room and underwent surgery shortly after. He was placed in a coma to relieve the pressure on his brain. The only thing he had on him was his motel room key, which led them to identify him as Walter Bennett. Among the papers in his hotel room was a copy of the divorce agreement that made me responsible for handling his divorce. That's why they called me. Your husband specifically instructed me to manage the divorce so that you wouldn't have to deal with him directly. I regret to inform you, but you're not permitted to see him in the hospital. This decision is based on very clear verbal instructions Mr. Bennett gave me regarding his relationship with you. However, your children are allowed to visit him, but I have the authority to decide on any other visitors." "What?" "He's my husband. Of course, I can see him. I'm truly sorry, but the mandate he signed gives me, and only me, the authority to make decisions regarding the divorce and his medical care. I must follow his last verbal instructions. If you wish to challenge this legally, I suggest you act quickly." "Wasn't the divorce proceeding canceled because of his condition?" "No, ma'am. I received strict orders to continue with the divorce, regardless of his situation, though I doubt he anticipated being robbed. All financial, insurance, and beneficiary actions he took remain in effect." "This is absurd. I tricked my husband into thinking I was going on a date with another man. When I came back to tell him it was a joke, he had already left. He got rid of his cell phone, so I couldn't even tell him it was all just a prank. There's no reason for the divorce or for the steps he took in response to a joke. I mean, no disrespect, but that's your account of events. I have to follow Mr. Bennett's instructions, which he confirmed in writing. I have no other option. I hate to inform you of this, but you will be served at work tomorrow, as Mr. Bennett requested. Once you get a lawyer, have them contact me to discuss the next steps. I don't care what you say. He's my husband, and I'll see him if I want to." I almost forgot to mention, the envelope you'll be receiving contains a restraining order, requiring you to stay at least 1,000 feet away from him. He's being quite generous in the petition, stating that he wants you to have a chance with the man you supposedly desire now. Nancy relayed the lawyer's words to the kids, struggling to believe what was happening. Determined, she declared that she would go to the hospital, regardless of what anyone said. The girls agreed to go with her. However, when they arrived at the hospital, they were met with disappointment. Although the hospital didn't have a copy of the restraining order, they weren't allowing any visitors due to COVID restrictions. They were informed that once he was transferred to the ICU, he could have visitors, but only one person for 10 minutes every 2 hours. Frustrated and unsatisfied, Nancy and her daughters returned home. By the time Walter was admitted to the ICU, the restraining order had already been enforced. While one of the daughters could visit him, it seemed pointless. He was unconscious, and if he could understand anything being said, they had no way of knowing. A few days later, the mountain search and rescue team found the truck. It was assumed that the robber was the deceased driver. Walter's wallet was found, but several $100s of the $6,000 were missing, likely spent on the bottles of rare Kentucky bourbon discovered in the truck, one of which was more than half empty. As time passed, Nancy's financial situation grew more difficult. Walter had forgotten to deposit his paycheck into their joint account, which covered the mortgage and other bills. Desperate, Nancy hired a lawyer, who petitioned the court to grant her access to half of the remaining money in the account. Finally, it was time to bring Walter out of his drug-induced coma. When he woke up, he claimed not to know who he was. The diagnosis: temporary amnesia. Linda, one of the twins, brought photos and shared memories in an attempt to jog his memory, but all efforts were in vain. He didn't even remember the lawyer who held his power of attorney. In his current state, he wasn't considered competent enough to have the restraining order lifted. As Walter began to regain consciousness, he was subjected to a memory test to assess his amnesia. Realizing what was happening, he quickly decided to play along. He was informed that his daughters wanted to see him. Carol, the other twin, was the first to visit. "Dad, do you know who I am?" she asked gently. "I'm one of your daughters, Carol. You were attacked and fell into a coma. We've been waiting for you to wake up." He questioned. "Yes, Linda and I, and Mom, your wife." "I have a wife." "Why isn't she here?" "She's not allowed to come." "You two had a misunderstanding, and now there's a restraining order against her." "Oh my God, does she actually want to harm me?" "No, Dad, she doesn't. She's no threat to you. You were just really angry with her." "Why?" "She pretended to go on a date with another man. Before she could tell you it was a joke, you left and started the divorce proceedings. Now that you're awake, you can undo all of this." "How do I know she didn't go on a date?" "She says she didn't." "But didn't you just say she said she was going on a date?" "Yes, but it was a lie." "So, she lied about going on a date, but now she's telling the truth about not going on a date." "I might not remember you or her, but I'm no fool. I have to assume I took action to protect myself." "Sorry, miss, but your 10 minutes are up," a nurse interrupted. "You'll have to leave now." 2 hours later, Linda came to see her father. "I spoke to you before, didn't I?" Walter asked. "No, that was my twin sister, Carol. I'm Linda. Don't you recognize me?" "I'm sorry, not yet. But you and your sister are very lovely young women. Were we on good terms?" "I understand your mother and I were separated." "We were on good terms. Mom played a prank on you, and you were attacked and injured before she could tell you it was a joke. You started divorce proceedings without knowing it was a joke. You need to stop this, Dad." "I don't know what to do. I don't know if you're my daughter or not. I don't know who my wife is, or if I even have a wife. I think it's best not to do anything until I regain my memory, if I ever do." "Do I have a lawyer?" "You have two, one for regular cases and one divorce attorney. You authorized the divorce. Maybe talking to him would help refresh your memory. Could you reach out to him and ask him to visit me?" "Of course, anything that might bring your memory back." "Dad, can you please let Mom visit you? It's killing her that she can't see you and apologize. I don't think I'd feel safe around her." "Maybe later, Mr. Bennett. I'm Chris Andrews, your family law attorney. Do you remember me? Is everything we discuss confidential?" "Absolutely." "Good. I don't have amnesia. I'm just trying to figure out what to do about my divorce. What I do remember is telling you to give her more so she could move on without me." "That's correct. She's been served, and she has a lawyer." "Do you want to cancel the divorce and terminate the agreement?" "No, and no. Can you investigate whether she really didn't go on that date and let me know what you find? I can hire someone on your behalf if you authorize it." "Do it." Walter continued to pretend he had amnesia, keeping up conversations with his daughters while ignoring their pleas to let their mother visit and stop the divorce. He was waiting for his lawyer's report. A few days later, the report from the private investigators came in. Unfortunately, they couldn't find enough evidence to confirm whether or not she actually went on that date. The man she was with insists nothing happened, but since he's married, he might be too scared to tell the truth. The decision to believe her or not is yours to make. That's what I was afraid of. Thanks for the information. I think it's time for me to recover my memory. Let's keep moving forward with the divorce process." Carol was the only one who heard him say her name from memory. Soon after, Walter told her that his memories had come rushing back, including that night of Nancy's so-called betrayal, or deception, depending on what you believe. He agreed to meet with Nancy. After some tearful hugs, Nancy began, "Walter, it was just a trick, a sneaky prank to push you into changing. Tom and I only drove around the block. but by the time we got back, you were already gone. And how do I know that's true? Walter asked, skepticism etched in his voice. I can get Tom to come and tell you himself. He's the one who helped me pull off this stunt, so I'm supposed to take the word of the guy you cheated on me with to convince me that you didn't actually cheat on me? Sorry, but I'm not buying it. I tried calling you, but you left your phone at home. I waited all night for you to come back, but you never did. Was anyone with you while you waited? Tom stayed for a couple of hours and then left. I'm sure he'll back me up on this, and I'm supposed to believe that? I waited until the next day for your call, but when I didn't hear from you, I called your office. That's when I learned you were going full scorched earth on our marriage, over a so-called fake romance. You couldn't wait to get rid of me, could you? Why would I want to hold on to someone who told me, right to my face, that she was going to deceive me? You said you wanted another man, standing right there in our house. I was devastated. But because I loved you, I wanted to give you what you wanted as quickly as possible. Besides, I didn't want to be married to someone who no longer respected our vows. Why prolong the agony? Let's just go ahead and get the divorce. I don't want a divorce, Walter. I never intended to really cheat on you, and I never did. I was just trying to push you to fight for me, to bring some life back into our marriage. Clearly, I went about it the wrong way. I'm sorry. Please, Walter, stop the divorce. Let's get back to our lives. I love you, even if what you're saying is true, and I'm still not convinced. It was a cruel, vile joke. I don't know if I want to stay married to a woman who would do something like that. For now, the divorce process is continuing, and I'll be moving into my own apartment once I leave the hospital. Walter, this is such a waste of money. You have a home and a bed here. I'll move into another room in the house for a while, if that's what it takes to get you back. Visiting time is over, and I want to see my daughters. Nancy was escorted out of the ward. The twins tried to plead their mother's case, but neither could account for the exact amount of time she spent with Tom that night, so it made no difference to Walter. When the time came for him to be discharged, he did, in fact, move into an apartment near his work. The divorce process continued until Nancy's lawyer demanded mandatory counseling for both of them, 12 sessions in total. Walter didn't resist. Nancy went first. I love my husband very much. We had a wonderful marriage and raised 2 beautiful daughters together. I think the empty nest syndrome hit him harder than it did me. I wanted to fill that gap by spending more time with him, doing different things together, rather than just being in the same house. But Walter seemed to distance himself from our marriage. Our sex life stayed the same, just as it had been when we had to keep things quiet at Tim's so the girls wouldn't hear us. Their absence didn't change anything for Walter. I wanted to shake things up, so he'd pay more attention to me. I convinced a male friend from work to join me in what I called shock therapy. One evening, I pretended to go on a date with him. We drove around the block, and I planned to come back and tell Walter it was a joke, to make him realize how much our marriage meant. But when we returned 10 minutes later, he was gone, and I never got the chance to talk to him. The next day, I called his office and found out he had already started divorce proceedings. A few days later, I learned he had been robbed and was in a coma. When he woke up, he didn't believe that my fake date was just a ruse, and he's been pursuing a divorce ever since. I know I was wrong, and I beg him to give me another chance. Walter, what's your take on what happened? She's got some of it right, but she left out a few key details. When her boyfriend showed up, she didn't just tell me she was going out with him. Despite my protests, she said she hoped to spend the night having sex with him. That's when I knew our marriage was over. I figured it was my fault, so I wanted to get out as quickly as possible. I left our home, her home, so she could have the man she wanted, and I could start over. I took steps to separate us as quickly as possible. I gave power of attorney to a lawyer because I didn't even want to think about Nancy anymore, let alone talk to her. I planned to give her a generous divorce and move on with my life. I never expected to be robbed or to end up in a coma. When I came out of it, I didn't even remember who I was. Sometimes, I wish I had just stayed in that coma, oblivious to the memories of that night. Nancy claims she never actually went on the date, but she hasn't offered any real proofs. In my mind, it's just as likely that she did go on the date and slept with this guy, Tom. I think she only changed her story when she realized the social and financial consequences of what she'd done. Now, I'm being asked to believe that it was all just a joke, and that I should go back to living with a woman who didn't hesitate to break my heart. Even if she's telling the truth, she's proven she's willing to hurt me when it suits her. How can I live with that? Every night when I come home, I'd have to wonder, am I coming home to a loving wife or a cheater planning her next move? It would be cleaner to just go through with the divorce. She and Tom can have their life together, and I can try to move on with mine. It seemed we were at a standstill until Nancy brought Tom to one of our counseling sessions. "Walter, I want to apologize for my part in the prank," Tom began. Nancy assured me everything would be fine, but I had my doubts when she got into my car. I swear, we only drove around the block before heading back to the house. She was stunned to find you gone. We realized you'd left your phone behind when we found it in your room. I stayed with her, waiting for you to return. Most of the time, she just kept talking about how much you meant to her and how much she regretted what we did. After a while, I left. "I'm really sorry, Walter. Do you believe me now, Walter?" Nancy asked, her voice pleading. "His words sound sincere, but maybe he's just a good actor," I replied, still unsure. "Walter, there's nothing more I can do to prove it was just a joke. I promise, no matter what's happened in the past, I'll never play around with you like that again. Can't you just trust me? Let's be real," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You lied to me that night when you said you were going to spend it with Tom. Then you turned around and claimed nothing happened. Now you're asking me to believe that you're telling the truth this time and that you'll never do something like this again? How am I supposed to know where the lies end and the truth begins? It all comes down to trust, Walter," Nancy responded, her voice softening. "If we want to move forward together, you're going to have to trust me. If you can't do that, then I'll agree to the divorce," the counselor chimed in. "I have a suggestion. What if we draw up a post-nuptial agreement that states if Nancy ever pulls something like this again, you get all the property in the divorce? Would you agree to that, Nancy?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "And you, Walter?" "I think I could give it a try," I replied cautiously. Nancy moved over and hugged me. Slowly, I started to reintegrate into our marriage, but it took a long time before we shared the same bed again. Our interactions were delicate, fragile even. But over time, we started building something new, taking walks together, tackling household projects, visiting our daughters, and even traveling. Our sex life became more active than it had been before the incident, and Nancy began to feel at ease at home again. One day, Walter called and told Nancy not to cook dinner. It sounded like he had plans for the evening. He had to hang up quickly, so Nancy was left wondering what was going on. She figured it had something to do with the reorganization at his job due to the merger and assumed he'd received good news. When Walter came home, he went straight upstairs. "I'm changing for tonight," was all he said as he passed by. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. Nancy answered it to find a woman standing there, who looked about 10 years younger than them. She was very attractive and dressed in professional attire. "Yes, can I help you?" Nancy asked, trying to hide her confusion. "I'm here for Walter." "We're going out tonight." Nancy's mind flashed back to the incident she had been trying to forget. Was this his way of getting revenge? An idea began to form in her mind. She invited the woman in. "You have a lovely home, Mrs. Bennett," the woman remarked, glancing around. "Thank you," Nancy replied. "Excuse me for just a moment. I need to let Walter know you're here." She turned and shouted up the stairs, "Walter, your friend is here." His reply was muffled, but she assumed he said he'd be down shortly. She returned to the woman, who seemed to be looking around the house with interest. Nancy was about to ask her a question when she heard Walter coming down the stairs. And then Nancy snapped. Without warning, she wrapped her hands around the woman's throat and began to choke her, lightly at first, but with growing intensity. "You home-wrecking bitch," she hissed, convinced that this was part of some twisted revenge prank. The woman, clearly panicked, began to struggle. Walter screamed, "Nancy, stop. What the hell are you doing?" Nancy started laughing maniacally. "Gotcha this time, didn't I? Trying to pull one over on me again, huh? What are you talking about?" Walter shouted. "This is Jennifer Hughes, my new manager from the merger." Jennifer, now free from Nancy's grasp, was furious. "I like to think my team is made up of normal people, both during and after work hours. But if this is what you consider normal, you can kiss your new position goodbye. I'll be in the car, waiting for you to take me back to the hotel." She stormed out of the house, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. "Nancy, what have you done?" Walter's voice was filled with anger and disappointment. "Just when I thought we were getting back on track, you go and destroy everything, our marriage and my job. I'm leaving to try and salvage what I can. Don't expect me to come back and save this marriage." He followed Jennifer out the door, leaving Nancy alone. She ran upstairs and threw herself onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. "What the hell is happening? What have I done?" About 15 minutes later, Walter returned with Jennifer. He called Nancy downstairs. "We need to talk," he said sternly. "You are being played, Nancy. Jennifer and I set this up as a prank, but you went off the rails." Nancy clung to Walter, crying out her apologies. They all went out for dinner and a few drinks afterward. Jennifer shared how she had been genuinely scared during the prank but thought the payoff was worth it, with Walter's help. Eventually, Nancy managed to laugh along with them, though the tension was still palpable. When they got home, Nancy went to clean up the kitchen before heading to bed. Walter went upstairs. But as soon as he entered the bedroom, he froze. His automatic pistol, which was always locked away, was lying on Nancy's nightstand. He picked it up and found a bullet in the chamber, with the safety off. His heart sank.